Welcome to the Movie Business Podcast, picking up where Movie Business Book left off. I'm Jason Squire, hosting a wide range of industry talent and executives to answer fundamental questions about the business today. Here we go. And the secrets of AI, generative artificial intelligence, will be explored with Rachel Joy Victor, a consultant and co-founder of FBRC.AI, which creates AI-supported tools for content production, from films to games to location-based experiences. As a designer, Rachel draws from her education in computational neuroscience and spatial economics to facilitate the creation of data-informed emergent experiences, where world simulation, systems design, and cognitive architectures intersect, ranging from multiplatform narratives and gaming to tools and platforms, spaces, and cities. Clients have included Disney, HBO, Technicolor, Ford, Nike, among others. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you could take the time to be with us on the Movie Business Podcast.
I'm glad to be here. I love the epic intro. I'm excited to dive into it.
Well, that's great. Thank you. So let's do it. What are the secrets of AI?
Where to start? I think I always like to level set by talking about what is this context of where we are with AI in the industry right now. I think for a lot of people, we're seeing this one version of AI pop up in the last 2 years or so that's been pretty interesting, pretty scary, pretty new, all of these things. But we're really building on a history. All the things we're seeing now really started in the 1950s, the 1960s, and have led to where we are today. So I think when we talk about the secrets of AI, it's really important to kind of know the history of what we're building on and how we've gotten to where we are today.
It does make sense. That this is the way technology operates. Now let's turn to your company, FBRC. What does that stand for, and what does the company do?
Yep, we're FBRC.AI, or Fabric. We are really focused on the in-between space between AI development, AI startups that are being developed, and entertainment, and really understanding what entertainment needs are and where AI can step in and fill in the gaps. So we're identifying startups that are solving for problems and basically plugging them into studios where they can develop proof of concepts to find what we call product pipeline fit, really see how they can solve for a specific problem, how they'll be adopted, and then use that to scale in different ways.
So would you say that this is like an overlay over the traditional production pipeline where you can provide nuance and value while saving money and speeding things up?
I think it's a combination of that, and also we are seeing new pipelines develop. So I think when we break down, to go back, I guess, to where the secrets of AI are taking us, right? There are almost like three categories that are emerging where AI is supporting the production process. I think one is the general overlay over the production process. And we've seen AI kind of enable efficiencies in the space for a while. So if we think of AI itself as a big bucket, within that bucket, there's a category called machine learning, right? Machine learning is something that's been around for a while. It's using statistical methods to find patterns, to organize information, things like that. And so machine learning in different forms has already been kind of part of the post-production process and a lot of different tools that we're using in different ways. Where we're seeing all the innovations in the last 2 years is really a category within machine learning called deep learning, that is AI that's not just finding patterns, but that's using those patterns to kind of educate itself and train itself over time, and within that then generate new kinds of content. So when we're talking about something like generative AI, which is entering the industry and maybe creating new forms of workflows, it's really a subset of a subset of a subset of AI. It's just one type of AI that's we're seeing in the industry at large. So if we're thinking about all those categories of AI, there's AI as an overlay over the traditional production process, and that's kind of continuing to accelerate, where AI can, cause efficiencies with upresing of content, with coloring, with rotoscoping, all of these different things that can become easier with AI kind of as a companion, right? Then we're seeing this new kind of workflow emerging with generative AI, where people are really excited about seeing how far we can go with just generative content. So when you're looking at tools, if you see like Pika Labs, if you see Runway, these are all tools that, in addition to things like OpenAI Sora, are trying to see if we can use prompts to like wholesale generate content. The challenge with generative content is that most of these decisions for filmmaking happen at the level of the frame. So usually when we're filming, when we're creating content, we have 3D space that we're working within, right? Production design makes decisions about the background, costume designers make decisions about the costumes, the director is thinking about, blocking, and the cinematographer is thinking about camera movement. All these decisions kind of happen in a broader space. With generative AI, a lot of what's happening is all of those decisions get collapsed to the level of a prompt. So if you've ever played with those generative video tools, you're trying to say something about the camera style and the lens style, and also describe the scene and the nuances and the movement and all of those things all at once. The technology is getting better, but we're still starting to see how far it can really move into the actual production process, or if it's going to be more of a pre-production ideation kind of tool.
So all of this is kind of evolving, and the industry is doing experimental work. I wanted to focus on OpenAI's recent introduction of Sora, which really exploded my brain when I saw samples of their super realistic text-to-video application. It's really stunning. And, it just seems like it's an industry game changer with the potential of replacing a lot of jobs. What do you say to that?
I think that there's still a ways to go. I think Sora is pretty incredible. I think one thing that makes it pretty incredible is that it is trained. All of these things like we talked about with these things within deep learning, they need to be trained, right? They need to understand how video operates, how people move, all of these things. So the game changer, I think, with Sora is that it's been trained with much more understanding of how space operates and how physics operates. A lot of previous video tools, their only training was from 2D videos, right? Which don't really convey things about how people move in real space and all of that. So Sora is more knowledgeable about space, about physics, all of these things, but it's still not perfect. There's still going to be errors with it. So I think that comes back again to that question of like production readiness. Where is this actually going to fit within the production cycle? How far can we use it? And is it worth then the amount of time that we're going to need to actually render out these types of scenes? Because the challenge is going to be, okay, great. We like generally how this scene looks. We like all the choices that was generated. We like the layout of it and everything. We just want to change the camera angle of it, right? It's coming in and panning in from the left. We want it to pan in from the right. If we want to do that with, say we had a virtual scene and virtual cameras, we don't have to recreate that whole scene from scratch. We just change how the camera moves. If we're trying to do that with a tool like Sora, at least at the moment, we would need to regenerate that whole scene, that whole environment from scratch at the same time that we were changing the type of camera angle we wanted and the camera movement that we wanted. And so we might lose something in that scene that we enjoyed the first time around, not to mention, again, the amount of time and compute that power that goes into recreating that scene. So because of that, lack of control in the way that creatives may want, there's going to be that challenge of really thinking about how far it can go in really supporting a production process. I can really see it be used, I think, for, maybe second unit kind of work if there's just like B-roll or things that are small shots that need to kind of be within a larger production rather than, sending out a whole crew to get one shot. It might be cost efficient to really try to get what you need through an engine like Sora. But I think it's going to be a little bit longer till we have that fine-grained level of control to really see it taken all the way through the production process.
Wow, well, that's certainly something to look forward to. Well, now let's turn to your advice for someone being introduced to the tools of AI.
I think it's a challenging time. I think it can be scary if you haven't tried these tools and you don't know what they are capable of and what they're not capable of. So when I was just talking about Sora, for instance, I'm trying to be very specific about, this is what it can do, this is what it can't do, that if you're just watching the videos that OpenAI has shared of Sora, it can be kind of scary and intimidating. So I think to really get into it, to really understand where these tools are going and where we fit in and how to upskill and all of those things within the production process, really need to get your hands dirty, start playing with these tools and also try to go a level deeper, right? They're all the kind of tools that make the UI really easy, and that's a great way to get started. So obviously, if you're doing text, ChatGPT is a great starting point. If you're doing images, Midjourney is great. If you're doing video, Pika Labs or Runway is great. But if you want to go a step deeper, you should start to understand how these tools are functioning and why they're making the choices they're making. So with ChatGPT, for example, if you want to go a level deeper, OpenAI has something called Playground, where you can start playing with the parameters of the model and seeing how it changes the type of output. Or for Stable Diffusion, which is the image model that's behind a lot of these image and video tools, instead of just using something like Midjourney, if you play around with something called Comfy UI, you can use that to really understand the different types of vision models that are present and how to have more control with vision models. And all of those things take you a little level deeper. So you're starting to understand the logic of how these systems operate, because it's not necessarily intuitive why it makes decisions it makes and how it's thinking through these processes. But the more you understand that, the more you understand how they operate, what role they're going to play, and thus how you should be upskilling and how you should begin to start using them or thinking how they fit within the workflow.
Well, it's also great that so much of this is available online for free trials and to just, try things out.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really why, this generation of AI tools has really gotten where it's gotten. I think obviously the quality, the data sets, the models have gotten so much better just in the last couple of years. But beyond that, I think it's also reached a point where it's easy for consumer adoption at large. Like people can really pick it up relatively easily and start playing with it, start using it in different ways. Like the number of people I know that are incorporating something like ChatGPT into their, day-to-day life for drafting emails, for doing different things like that is really large because it's so easy to use.
Here's a question about all your exploration and expertise. Can you suggest something that particularly surprised you when working with these tools?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the speed at which it's gotten to this level has been really interesting to see. I think even just a couple of years ago, there was a much later kind of time scale for when we'd be at this point. Even from people that were working, directly with the tech, they thought that it was going to take longer for there to be this level of consistency in results, right? So we've talked about kind of a little bit in the beginning the history of these tools, and there are versions of generative tools that were released to the public, even 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. And those tools always kind of fell apart after being out in the wild for a little while. They were too influenced by, the input that people were putting in. And to reach this point of relative stability with these tools this quickly has been pretty interesting. I am kind of interested to see where the cap on that is. We're still having, for example, with these tools, we're having hallucinations, which is when, an AI tool can just, especially like a generative text tool, might just make something up entirely.
I've had those. Yeah, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
Go on.
Especially if it gets to dates. I don't know, like don't really trust if ChatGPT ever gives you a date. Always find another source of whether that's the actual date or if it gives you a title of a book or someone's full name. Those are always things that it seems very confident about it. It should, they give you all these extra details about it, but it's not entirely true, right? So those are still issues. Like it's definitely gotten better, but those are still issues with the underlying technology, the underlying model. And people are working on this. They're trying solutions. If you hear terms like vector search or RAG, those are all methods where people are trying to introduce more control into this process because this is all self-trained. The AI is teaching itself and making patterns and figuring things out. So it's not always going to be right about the things that it tells itself.
And what about client resistance? I mean, you must be at the same time when presenting suggestions and material, also teaching a lot of the clients because they may not have the background.
For sure. I think one thing we're seeing a lot, especially with generative AI, because there are a lot of open legal questions about data sets and training sets that have been used, and also about security of a company's data, right? If they're using a cloud-based model and not running it locally within their company, there's the potential that when they put questions and data into these systems, that those will then become, more widely available. And there's a security concern, right? So there are all these legal and security concerns that are really guiding how studios and other clients think about adoption of AI. I think that's been kind of the leading the leading factor of what gets adopted and what doesn't. But I think it's also, there's in general a broader shift, right? If we're thinking about the filmmaking process in general, there's been a movement towards the process becoming more computational, becoming more data intensive. If we're thinking about like virtual production, right, and different implementations of it, there's the way that you think about camera data from the real world and then how that translates to a virtual camera and a virtual scene, right? There's so much data like that now that we have throughout the production process, and AI can introduce efficiencies across all of these stages of the production process. But everything kind of comes down to, is the studio, is the production set up to really take advantage of that efficiency, of the way that AI can streamline that type of data. And as an example, I'll give, there was this project I worked on almost 10 years ago, I guess at this point, that was focused on the idea of the digital or virtual backlot and of being able to reuse assets across production. So you create an asset for VFX, now you're creating a virtual reality experience. How can you maybe reuse that asset and the rigging of that asset, maybe find a way to create a version with less LOD, but something without rebuilding that asset from scratch for this new platform, right? That's something that AI can help facilitate. That's something that can be more efficient and maybe save time. But it's something that isn't just a tech issue. It's also an organizational issue, right? It's something that to really leverage that, the two departments, one that's doing VFX, one that's doing virtual reality, have to talk to each other, have to figure out what resource sharing looks like, who actually ends up owning the cost of creating that asset, right? All of these different kind of nuances that are beyond the technical level that really get in the way of this efficiency really being introduced in a tangible way.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you for providing that information. And finally, let me ask, what's your prognosis for all of this? Where are we heading? Goodness.
I think it comes back to the question you just asked, right? Which is the adoption is going to come down, I think, to two levels. One is the technology level of like what needs to happen with the tech, how does it need to get better? I think the tech is getting better. I think we're going to see a little bit of plateauing in the next couple years of where the tech is, of all these methods. Like I mentioned, they're really heavily relying on a generative method of AI, which is very self-trading, and there are limits to some of the things that it can do. So we'll see where that levels out. I think that's the tech track, right? The other track is the adoption track, and seeing the applications that are developed and seeing how much studios are able to actually leverage this. I think some of it is the startups themselves. And we're seeing at Fabric, we get so many startups kind of coming through our doors. And there are some really good startups. You know, some people are just building a wrapper over the model, but some people are actually developing really targeted UI, really targeted applications that are solving for production issues. So I think that space is really interesting. That space is really great right now. I think the other half of the coin is going to be studio adoption and seeing which studios lean into it and where they lean into it. And I think that's accelerating. We're seeing more of those conversations happening this year as legal departments do their assessments, as they're vetting. We're kind of getting to the point that studios are starting to actually incorporate this tech in a real way. Wow. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Obviously, I think regulation, and I think that concerns about safety, and I think concerns about data sets are going to and should be part of the conversation as we move forward. But I'm excited to see where it all goes and where it all converges.
There's a lot to look forward to. Thank you for summarizing that and for visiting the Movie Business Podcast. Rachel Joy Victor. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me.